Hi book friends, I'm Erin and this is Erin Go Read. As I'm filming this, it is New Year's Eve, and I thought I would give you a little idea of my reading year this year. Some of my favorites, some of the most important books of the year for me. I read around 90 books. It's hard to exactly count because I wasn't really dialed into Goodreads until like late spring, early summer. So I want to start off with not necessarily my favorite book, but the book that got me into YouTube. That is Arcadia by Ian Pierce. It took me quite a while to read it. It's just shy of 600 pages. And when I finished it, I didn't have anybody to talk to about it. I'd never heard of it before. And so I just Googled it, and I ended up coming across a YouTube review from Rachel Colonnati on her channel, Colonnati. And that was my initiation into booktube. The book that I believe actually was my first book of the year was A Man Called Eva by Frederick Bachman. And I listened to the audiobook, so I know that this is pronounced Uva. Uva is a kind of a grumpy, miserable widow. He is planning for his suicide, but due to his needing things to be a certain way and just he's a very fussy elderly man where things have to be done in a certain place and nobody can do anything right. And so things keep coming up that basically get in the way of his suicide. Well, some of the things that get in the way of the suicide are his neighbors and people that he slowly starts to build relationships with in his community. And as these relationships form, he begins to slowly evolve and soften a bit. And he has a great impact on their life and they have a great impact on his life. So I just was in love with this book. I am almost stopping myself from rereading it too soon. How soon is too soon? I don't know, but I will definitely be reading A Man Called Eva again, 5 stars. A book that reminded me quite a bit of A Man Called Eva was Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. Eleanor is another character who is a bit peculiar. Oh, Stevie, it's okay. You want to say hi to the people? Whoops. Hi. Do you need some love? Do you need some love? Oh, goodness. He really needs love. He really needs love. The Calculating Stars by Mary Robinette Kowal. So this is an alternate history of the space race. A meteorite hits off the coast of the east coast of the United States in 1952. And our main character, Elma York, who was a World War II pilot, she's a mathematician, physicist, she determines through her calculations that this is going to become an extinction event and they need to find a way to get humans off of Earth. And so we need to get to the moon far faster than we were ever anticipating to. So you have a lot of the same elements of like a Hidden Figures where you have women who are acting as the calculators, like actual doing the calculations or the computing. And many of them are African American. There is, I think, one Asian American, I think she's Chinese woman. And so you get the very similar social kind of commentary and history of what was actually happening in the 50s, women existing in a really male-dominated space. And it's just this really exciting adventure are they going to make it to the moon? What's going to happen to Earth? You also have a beautiful relationship between Elma and her husband with all of the chaos and the worry that's happening in their work lives. He is also involved in the space program. They can come home to each other, and it's a really nice juxtaposition, the chaos and the fear that's happening in the rest of their life to be able to come home to each other. One of my favorites this year was Wives and Daughters by Elizabeth Gaskell. I read a few classics this year. I did participate in Victober. I read Jane Eyre, which I absolutely loved. I also read Wives and Daughters, and I thought I would give this one kind of the appearance in this video because everybody knows of Jane Eyre, at least if you haven't read it, and fewer people know of Wives and Daughters and Elizabeth Gaskell, and I think it deserves its due. This follows Molly Gibson, who lives with her father. Her mother has died, and she's reaching the age now where she needs more socialization. She needs to get out in the world a bit, and it follows her getting close to another family, the Osbornes. They have some sons, and I just love Mr. Osborne. There's just a beautiful, sweet relationship between Molly and Mr. Osborne. Mr. Gibson ends up remarrying when Molly is 17 years old, and so that brings its own little complications. Now she has a stepmom to deal with at the same time. There's kind of some romance happening, and now a stepsister, and she has her own romance going on. So you have a lot of these kind of big life situations that a lot of us deal with. I get kind of like Anne of Green Gable vibes from this. It just like felt like home, and this will definitely be reread sooner rather than later. A hard but beautiful and important book I read during Nonfiction November is In Order to Live by Yeonmi Park. So this is the story of this young North Korean woman, her life in North Korea, how difficult things are, how trying things are, and what leads her and her family trying to escape North Korea. So I think this happens in 3 separate parts. You follow 3 different stages of this, and I wanted to give you just a little short excerpt from their life in North Korea, and she's talking about how poor people are and desperate for food. There were so many desperate people on the streets crying for help that you had to shut off your heart or the pain would be too much. After a while, you can't care anymore, and that is what hell is like. Another Nonfiction November read has made its rounds. It's made the rounds around booktube, and that is Educated by Tara Westover. It is worth all the hype. It is correct. I love this cover. The pencil shaving there. It's a mountain and she's standing on it. This is about this young girl, Tara, as she is growing up with her family. Her father is very afraid of the government. He essentially creates, they're Mormon, but he basically takes on like a cultish twist. So there's some mental illness going on that makes him twist the Mormon religion into something far more extreme, and doesn't trust the government, doesn't trust schools or hospitals, and so he completely isolates his family from all of this. And so in order for Tara and her siblings to become educated and be a part of the world outside of their little life, she has to kind of take matters into her own hands and do whatever she must. And she ends up getting her PhD, I think, from Cambridge. So she's a really remarkable woman who had a very trying childhood, put in dangerous situations, not given medical attention when it was dire, when she was in dire need. Just a really great 5-star book. Give that a read. A book that I haven't seen much on YouTube this year yet is Kristen Hanna's The Great Alone. So this follows a teenage girl living in Alaska, and she and her mother live there with her father, who is a Vietnam vet. And her father has very hard time dealing with the effects of the war, and it has turned this, what she remembers as this really great dad, and her mom remembers as this really loving, great husband, into a man who is extremely affected by his PTSD, which of course wasn't called PTSD at the time, but now we know that to be the case. So this follows their life in Alaska as they've gone there to kind of escape. Things are going to be better for dad up there now. And the relationships that they form up there. There was a bit of a twist relating to an injury that, not really a twist. It was a twist to me because it relates to my life quite a lot. But a character in this book ends up with a traumatic brain injury. And I thought that the coma and the resulting deficits from the brain injury were very well done. We didn't have a miraculous awakening from a coma. So I thought that was very accurately portrayed. I really recommend The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. A really great surprise was a recent read of mine. This was my December Book of the Month choice, and this is The Far Field by Madhuri Vijay. So this follows a young Indian woman who is recently graduated from college. She's middle class, upper middle class. Her father is a successful factory owner, and her mother has recently died, and due to their socioeconomic status, she kind of has the luxury of being able to kind of roam about aimlessly, not knowing what she wants to do with her life. And we kind of get these two timeline perspectives of what's currently happening in her life, and then what happened as her childhood that leads up to her quest, basically. And so she gets her degree, and then she's just kind of waffling about. She's clearly depressed. They live in the south of India, in Bangalore, and she travels up to Kashmir, up in the mountains, to go visit this traveling salesman who used to come to their house quite regularly and visit with her and her mother. And so it's kind of a coming of age quest that she goes on. And one thing I really appreciated about this book, and one of the reasons that I really like reading, is that going into this book, I had basically two ideas of India. So I had like Bollywood, very opulent Indian lifestyle, and Slumdog Millionaire, like mud and flies. And although I know that there is an in-between there that probably most of the population lives in, I didn't have any frame of reference for that. And this provided that. So I really appreciated that for this. When Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie accepted her, I think it was when she was accepting the National Book Award, in her speech, she was talking about how I have Americana on my shelf. I haven't read it yet, but I believe it's in that book that the father, I think, who is Nigerian, is abusive. And she was at some sort of book event, and someone said, "Oh, it's so terrible that Nigerian men are abusive." And she was like, "Not all. Where did you get that?" Well, if the book Americana is your only ever experience with Nigerians, and there's a abusive Nigerian man portrayed, then I suppose you could generalize that to all Nigerian men if that's all you know of. She has all sorts of exposure to Western media and American culture, and so she says, "Well, I just read this book called American Psycho. Am I to believe that all white young men are serial killers?" So I think that type of exposure to different cultures, different sides of different cultures, is really important, and it's one of my favorite things about reading. One of my favorites this year is surprisingly a poetry collection. This is England, Poems from a School. This is a poetry collection written by, I think, 12 to 18-year-old children in England at an academy. What is it? The Oxford Spires Academy, which is a comprehensive school with 30 languages, with one focus being on poetry. So many of these children are refugees. They've come from very far away and experienced much in their short lives. So I wanted to give you just a short sample. This is To Make a Homeland. Can anyone teach me how to make a homeland? Heartfelt thanks if you can. Heartiest thanks. From the house sparrows, the apple trees of Syria, and yours very sincerely. That is by Amineh Abu Karech. 13 years old. So I'm not very good with poetry. I kind of know if I like it. I think that the fact that these were written by children kind of helps me maybe absorb it a little bit better. But I think one of the aims of poetry is to make you feel something. And these poems will definitely make you feel something because of the truth that these kids are writing about. And I was really surprised at how much I enjoyed this. It's hard to pick an absolute favorite. If I have to pick an absolute favorite, I'm going to give that to The Snow Child by Eowyn Ivey. So this takes place in the 1920s. A couple live in the lower 48 somewhere, and they've just experienced a stillborn child. The wife in particular basically can't go on living the way that they're living, surrounded by family who have children, seeing kids in line at the grocery store. She's constantly reminded of this terrible heartache that she has. And so they decide to head up to Alaska, try to make it up there. And basically the hardship of the weather, the hunting, the not knowing where your next meal is going to come from, just the constant arduous work that it takes just to survive in Alaska was favorable to the heartache of living in the lower 48 and being surrounded by the memory of their stillborn child. And so as they're living this very difficult life, and you're not thinking that, are they going to make it up there? Are they going to give up and move back home? The husband and wife have kind of a moment of fun, and they just start playing in the snow, and they start to build a snowman and basically carve it into a snow child. And they wrap a red scarf around it, and it's like this little girl made out of snow. Well, the next day, the wife is outside doing some work, and she sees, like, running across through the woods, what looks to be like a little girl with this red scarf on. And she continues to see it, and nobody believes that she's seeing this thing. And this continues on with this little girl showing up in their life, this little snow child showing up in their life. And you're wondering, is she crazy? Is this actually magic? So you get this really great fairy tale element. And then you find out that the wife knows of this Russian fairy tale that I believe her grandmother used to tell her and her sister. And as the story goes, you end up hearing the fairy tale, and it's so beautifully written. The atmosphere, the relationships that they end up forming. Remember, she went up there because she didn't want to be around people, basically, and particularly children. And they end up forming a relationship with some people who live nearby. And then she has her snow child. And it's really great to just watch her heart kind of get to be opened again in her new life in Alaska. So this is definitely 5 stars. So these are my top 12 favorite books of 2018. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. Have you read any of these books? Are you looking forward to reading these books? Do you agree with any of my choices? Thank you for watching. See you around the tubes. Sorry, buddy.